Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I'm going to be getting a bin out here on the bench for us to work on. I think before I do though, I should probably get my dustpan out and clean up this mess over here. I could see a little bit of white residual powder, and well, you know, when you could see residue of white powder on the bench down here in my wormery, it can only mean one thing, and that's I've been pulverizing eggshells to use as grit in my systems. I was starting to run a little bit low. Well, actually, I had a good amount of material already stocked up here, and I just processed a little bit more yesterday, so I'm in good shape when it comes to grit. But let me put on a glove, get that bin that we're going to work on up here on the bench, so we can get to work. The system that I wanted to work on is here on the bench. It's the 144-day-old now African nightcrawler worm bin. Up until now, it's received 14 feedings. And 12 of them, we've been doing this lasagna style feeding. And if we're able to feed today, it'll be the 13th time, because I will try to stick to that whole concept of feeding in layers. At this point, though, we're going to be utilizing any remaining layers of paper, cardboard, whatever is in there to kind of pretend that it's the noodle or pasta layers of the lasagna. And I'm guessing that after 11 days since we last came in here to feed, we're probably going to see some leftovers, because what we put in here was a bunch of coffee. I think that was all we put in here, and a lot of it. So my hope was that we might be able to squeeze one more feeding. It's just interesting because I was comparing this to my two oldest systems that are presently already at the stage of migrating the worms out of the material. Those two systems, when they reached the ages of 143 and 145, exactly 1 day older and 1 day younger than this one, was the day that each of them received their last feeding, switching from composting to a period of just foraging. And as far as the number of feedings too, in each of those cases, assuming that we do feed today and we make today the 15th feeding overall, those two systems that are presently migrating were each, one of them was fed 14 times and the other one was fed 16 times. So if we were to start this one on day 44 with its 15th feeding, it would pretty much be right on par with my two oldest systems that are presently already in the migrating phase. So I just kind of thought that was an interesting parallel to draw with a couple of my other systems that are doing pretty well. So who knows, maybe this will be the last feeding. But we're going to take a peek inside before I bring down any food, because I'm open to the possibility that it might not be possible to fit any food in here today. Maybe there's just a whole bunch of leftovers. Not sure what to expect, so let's get this thing opened up and see how things are progressing. Alright, try not to make a big mess. I didn't see any worms hanging out on the plastic. But it is amazing how sometimes those little tiny guys can just blend right in on that pink plastic. So there's just some sort of a slightly larger object here. It's I believe it's tea bag filter paper or tea bag paper, whatever. It's really getting worked down. It's a material that I had placed in here during one of the feedings and had pretty much created almost like an entire lasagna layer out of this stuff. And then there came a point in time not too long ago that I even thought that it was not going anywhere, that it wasn't going to break down whatsoever, because I didn't see any progress. And then I did bump into one piece finally that was showing good signs of wear, and that one piece convinced me to just stick it out and let them continue, and it does look like they're breaking down. So I don't know, what's the measure for whether or not we feed today? I guess if it looks like there's just tons and tons of leftover coffee, I suppose, since coffee was the last feeding, and I don't remember how many, if any, leftovers of previous feedings might have remained. I guess where we're at now is that pretty much all the remaining bits and pieces of leftover food from feedings gone by have somehow ended up in this lower pile of just mishmash, just a smorgasbord of all the leftover bits of, I don't know, there was maybe apple or asparagus or banana peels or whatever, whatever it is that still has a little bit more to go, has somehow ended up all down at the very lower layer. And then somehow we managed to come up with some sort of maybe pieces of paper or salvaged pieces of cardboard, I forget what it was, to try to segment or separate the layers from one another to continue to resemble this sort of lasagna layout. And I think if we can, we'll do it again. I think here too we were seeing the skins of some cantaloupe melon, which for the most part is gone, but that tough outer rind of this stuff is going to always take a little bit longer. I always wonder when this piece of cardboard is going to just finally give. It's always so incredible to see it kind of hold together as a single object to be used once again as a lasagna layer. But it's the only piece that really resembles a lasagna layer anymore as far as being one continuous, fairly large object. So we've been kind of pretending, I think, at this point, because we don't want to come in here with any fresh newspaper or cardboard or any new bedding type materials to be the layers. I think we've just been kind of, you know, picking out little pieces of whatever we can find, little salvageable pieces of cardboardish type paper things, and sort of improvising a lasagna layer there if possible. But if it comes that point where we can't really do that anymore, then maybe we'll just we'll stop pretending that it's a lasagna setup anymore. But I think we've got ourselves a good pile of stuff here. Oh yeah, I remember now. So this newspaper had actually been resting out on the top surface and went in pretty recently. So I think we are going to have usable lasagna layer materials here. In addition to the large piece of cardboard, there were these chunks of newspaper which are probably going to hold out a little bit longer since they were sort of folded over maybe once or twice. So that additional doubled up layer might be enough just to help it last a little bit longer. I guess the one thing I'm sensing in here is that the coffee that was used to feed last time does seem to be in here in pretty good quantities, or at least that's what it seemed to me as I was going through here. You know, you could sort of tell how castings look versus what coffee looks like, and there is a distinction, so that you can tell them apart when you're kind of picking through the stuff and when you're handling it and you're feeling the stuff breaking away. You can certainly tell the difference. Like that stuff right there that I was chipping away at, that's coffee. So right here is like a mound of residual leftover coffee. Seems to have the interest of this worm here. Actually, there was a few worms that appeared to be taking advantage of that little pile of coffee. But at this point, any leftover coffee bits are simply going to roll down into that bottom layer of sort of just a mixed bag of leftover foods from previous feedings. That's really all the middle is becoming anymore. It's just like a concentration of obviously a lot of castings too anymore, as the worms come in to continue to feast on all the little leftover bits of this and that. But it's all the leftover bedding bits. Well, the bedding bits I guess were meant to sort of lay in between what appeared to be layers. And I don't know, we might be able to do something like that again. But at this point we've been kind of treating this bottom layer of pretty much close to being complete leftovers as one layer, and then coming on top of that with additional stuff. So if there's anything salvageable in this stuff, then we'll pick it out and try to reuse it at this point. But I'm seriously doubting that we're going to be able to continue to do this for a whole lot longer. But you know, I could be proven wrong. There is a good amount of stuff here, right? If you think about that piece of cardboard, all these pieces of paper and stuff, it is enough bedding material that would probably keep the worms busy for a little while. So I could see us maybe coming in here a couple more times to continue to feed and to continue to promote the breakdown of that that material, rather than trying to adhere to some sort of a par, you know, number of feedings or a par age at which to transition into foraging. I think this bin can easily go a little bit longer. A lot of times I think the better measure for when to cut off further feedings and transition out of composting into some later stage phase is to use the capacity of the system as the measure for whether or not you can continue or not. But here I've made a clear opening in the middle for us to reconstruct these lasagna layers. And I've still got a little bit of extra room to work, so I could see just riding out this this residual cardboard over here until it's completely done by promoting traffic down in here to get the worms in here, to be feeding on the freshly added stuff, and also breaking down the residual leftovers. I didn't come down here with any food to give them, so I need to run upstairs. But I think I'm going to get material that's moisture laden, you know, stuff that's going to dump out a good bit of moisture as it thaws out. It'll be frozen, so hopefully the stuff that's out here on the surface will be evacuated of worms, and we'll use that as the basis for putting the frozen stuff in, so we don't pile frozen stuff on any individual little worms. So I'll be back in a minute and we'll feed. I told myself that if I saw, you know, a blatant overload of leftover coffee from the last feeding, I wouldn't put any coffee in with today's feeding, but things look okay here. I think they could take some more. And then I've got something that's always guaranteed to kick out a lot of moisture as it thaws out, which is all this pumpkin here. And there's also one little camouflaged item blended in here with the pumpkin. Can you see it? It's the peel of an orange, not frozen. Just had a little snack last night and I never threw it in the freezer. I figured I'll get rid of it here too. So how do we rearrange this thing now? I guess, like we said earlier, maybe a few pieces of this recycled bedding down here would serve as a nice little foundation to have pumpkin juice dripped onto it and increase its traffic, hopefully. I don't know, I guess we'll see. We'll put a little bit of stuff down there, and then we'll maybe toss a little bit of this other stuff that was also salvaged around it. Let's throw that orange peel down there too, as well as these chunks of orange. And all this stuff is orange. Maybe we'll try to create 2 layers, if possible. Each layer will get pumpkin and coffee. Only the bottom layer will get that orange peel. Okay. We'll save a little for the top layer, or the upper layer. So yeah, I was running a little bit low out here in this everyday container that I use for dispensing this stuff. I'll have to reload. So now something for us to pile more food on top of would be some of the stuff that needs a little bit more work to be broken down. All kinds of little scraps of residual cardboard and newspaper. Some of the stuff was kind of like folded on itself, bits of newspaper. Other parts of it were just fragments of this larger piece of cardboard, I believe. So we've managed to gather a few chunks of stuff like that together. Oh, here's a pretty good sized piece we can complete our coverage with. Here's another couple pieces. So now we got a nice little bedding layer in between the layers of food. And you know, once this stuff starts to thaw, it's just going to collapse down 1, 2, 3. So I think we're going to come back to a really good sized ditch in this bin next time we come in here. And I don't think it's going to last too long. You know, we waited 11 days this time between check-ins. I believe that this pumpkin's going to be gone in that much time. So we'll see. Maybe we'll come back in here, and heck, we always have that option at that point in the future to decide then that this is the last feeding. It's like, for whatever reason, yeah, you know what, maybe it would have been better to just make that the last day of composting and start into the foraging, but I don't know, we'll decide when we come back in here next time. It would be kind of nice if I could just continue running it as an active bin. There is another of my systems which was actually taken out of composting and started into foraging, and then I turned that decision around at a later point, and I got it back into active composting, and it's already received a couple feedings since it was reactivated. So, you know, there's also that as a precedent for how to think of these systems. I don't know, I think things are going to pick up a little bit too as far as just the general speed of composting in my systems, which slowed down a bit in the colder months during the winter. And you know, we're only a couple weeks from spring setting in, and we've had a couple warm days here and there. So perhaps the composting action down here in my wormery will pick up a little bit in speed. So I didn't want to add this piece of paper. We've been withholding the addition of extra stuff like this for some time. It was just that piece of newspaper that was top covering. We recycled it so that we'd have sort of a lasagna layer material to use. And at this point, we're also just trying to make the best use of any residual bits that remain. Look at this piece, it's coming apart. I don't know if we do start squeezing additional feedings in here after today. I could see one of the future feedings being one where we just decide we don't have enough leftovers anymore with which to build anything that even closely resembles a lasagna layered stacked arrangement. So perhaps we'll revert just back to everyday boring feedings at some point in the near future, but it is kind of fun to have a theme, and I think this theme here in this system has been not only fun to check in on, but also producing pretty decent results, so I can't really complain. So we'll continue with it if possible, but I don't know how much longer it'll be possible as these materials continue to break down so nicely. Alright, so I think we're more or less done here. Just try to level stuff off and get a gauge of how this stuff looks. Out on the edges, you know, sometimes we kind of excavate the outer edges, sort of out of the perimeter of the lasagna layers that we normally check in on, just to see how things are out there. And I believe our most recent check-in of the outer perimeters of this system did show that things were looking quite nice, and that's the reason I didn't really go too crazy searching around on the outer edges, because I'm pretty certain things are nice out there, and they'll be just fine. But hey, maybe next time we'll have a chance to take a look over there. All right, let's get this thing covered back up, and we'll be done here. So hopefully enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go, because that's always really very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.